I used to go hiking and explore caves for an outdoor activity when I was in college. I've explored some amazing abandoned mine shafts, saw some of the most popular mountains in the world, and rock climbed a whole bunch. I used to be a more outdoorsy person, and I've had plenty of strange encounters, but one sticks out to me the most. I was on a hike to an abandoned mine shaft in Nevada. I really liked exploring these historic relics and seeing what has been left behind. I found some really cool antiques, but for the most part, I'd take some photos and leave it be for the next explorer. The hiking trail I was on had two separate paths. One led you to a nice lookout, and the other one led you to the mine shaft. Not very many people knew about the trail that led to the mine shaft, because it was pretty overgrown and didn't look like much of a path. But for the more adventurous like me, I'd throw on a nice thick pair of jeans for the brush, the twigs, and possible snakes so they wouldn't harm me. It was about a 6-mile hike round trip, but being in the middle of Nevada in the summer was brutal. I got to the cave entrance around 3 in the afternoon. I took off my backpack and grabbed my flashlight. It was pretty worn down, and there was multiple timbers fallen at the cave entrance. I navigated my way through, and on the other side there was a pretty big tunnel that continued for a while. I walked through it looking at random things along the way. There was some graffiti at the beginning, but as you went deeper, it looked like things had been untouched for years. One thing I learned from caves and mine shafts is you absolutely do not want to get lost or hurt because you will most likely never be found. To avoid this issue, I'd always leave objects like rocks, strings, coins, or anything that signified the direction I came from, and I would never take risks and go down an unstable shaft. I had been walking through the mine shaft for about 15 minutes when I heard a human-like noise. At first, I wasn't too scared because like I said, there are a good amount of people that have explored this mine shaft and knew about it. It sounded like someone grunting and sounded out of breath. I'm always cautious when I hear stuff like this because you never know what kind of wildlife it can be as well. Last thing you want to do is get stuck in here with a mountain lion or bobcat. I continued through the mine shaft and the noise got louder. I eventually turned the corner and saw a flashlight lighting up the walls of the cave ahead. The grunting and out of breath continued, but at this point I was kind of relieved that I was just a person and I wasn't just hearing things. I continued down the mine shaft to where the flashlight was. There was a ladder that went down into another shaft that this person had climbed down. I got to the top of the ladder and said, "Hello? Do you need any help?" I heard the person say, "No, I'm good, just slowly getting up this ladder." This reply gave me instant chills. I could swear the voice that came from the bottom of the ladder almost sounded exactly like mine. I stepped back a couple feet and waited to see him emerge from the lower shaft. He was wearing some pretty expensive gear, with a headlamp, and was dressed the right way to be climbing around in an old mine shaft like this. Once he got to the top of the ladder, he turned off his headlamp and I was once again hit with chills. This guy looked exactly like me. He gave me a quick smile and said, "Thanks for looking out for me," and walked past me. I turned around and he carried on his way up the mine shaft. I dropped to my knees and started telling myself to snap out of it. I truly couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or if what I just saw was real. I tried to reason with myself that maybe the way voices echoed in a cave made voices sound similar, which was a reasonable possibility. But then again, the guy's face was an exact mirror of mine. The image of his smile kept repeating in my head, and I eventually thought I was going insane. I decided to start heading to the entrance once again and see if I could catch up to him. I walked relatively quicker on the way out than I did on the way in. I got to the cave entrance and he was gone. I sat on a rock once again, contemplating if what I saw was real, or if I was suffering from heat stroke, hallucinations, or inhaled something in the cave that made me think this was true. After resting for a little while, I got up and headed back to my car. I thought about it the whole ride home and was in complete shock and confusion still. Either that guy coincidentally had similar facial features as me, or this was a true paranormal experience. The thought of it still freaks me out today, and it's been over 3 years. Occasionally when I smile in the mirror, I get that image in my head again of him in the mine shaft. I just really wish I could have caught up to him in time and would have some sort of closure. I went on a hike called Punch Bowls. Basically what it was a bunch of holes in these rocks that would fill with mountain water, and people would go and swim in them. It was a pretty long hike, and for some reason this location in particular was filled with rattlesnakes, so you had to keep an eye out for them. My 3 friends and I have been on this hike multiple times and knew what to expect. Most of the time the hike would be filled with college students. so we brought a big Bluetooth speaker, a cooler with drinks, and another bag with snacks in it. The hike took about an hour to get there, and as expected, there was a bunch of people swimming around and basically having a party. We found a spot, set down all of our stuff, and jumped in. We swam around, met some new people, and had a good time. There was one guy there named Jason that told us if we go up another path, there was an even bigger swimming hole with a natural water slide. Obviously, my friends and I were intrigued. We put our shoes on and headed in that direction. After hiking for 20 more minutes, we arrived, and to our surprise, this area was just as crowded as the last spot. My friends and I jumped in and swam across to the water slide and probably went down it a dozen times before another group of guys swam over and wanted to check it out. There was about 5 of them, and each of them had a bottle of beer in their hands. These guys clearly had been drinking all afternoon, because they were slurring their words and acting like complete animals. My friends and I watched at a distance and had a good time watching these drunk guys try to climb up and get to the water slide. At one point, 2 of the guys that were climbing up to the water slide dropped their beer bottles in the water. They didn't even seem to notice. After a couple more minutes, one of the guys slid down the slide and at the bottom started to scream. We couldn't tell if he was messing around or actually hurt until we heard him wheezing and shouting again. His friends swam over and tried to get him out of the water. Once they did, he had a big cut going down his leg to his foot, and a piece of glass still stuck in his leg. I guess what had happened is when those guys dropped their beer bottles, they shattered at the bottom of the water slide. We went over to see if we could help, but the guy refused. He wrapped his feet and leg in this t-shirt and said, "Don't worry guys, this bump of cocaine will get me through the pain." We were shocked to say the least when we saw how much he was bleeding, but his friends picked him up and started walking back. We hung out there for a bit longer before heading back. On the hike back, we warned everyone we passed about the glass at the bottom of the water slide. We never knew what happened to that guy, but from that point on, we never returned to the water slide. My family and I were on a camping trip in Stone Mountain, North Carolina. We made it a tradition to come up here at least 2 times a year. It was such a beautiful place with tons of hikes, waterfalls, and our favorite old country store that had soft serve ice cream and all the candy you can imagine. The campsite we were on had a big spacious forest right behind it that our kids would love to explore and run around in. There was a small stream that went along the edge of the campsite that would make it very relaxing to listen to when falling asleep. This was by far our favorite campsite in the campground. That night, we huddled around the campfire trying to decide what to do the next day. We decided we'd look for a new hike and try to find one with a waterfall. We packed up our things and went to bed. The next morning, we woke up, got dressed, ate breakfast, and got in the car to look for a hiking trail. It didn't take us long and we found just what we were looking for. The only thing we didn't like was the distance. It was about an 8-mile hike round trip, which wasn't bad, but for my kids, it was the longest hike they've been on. The hike was pretty uneventful, but being in nature and seeing the waterfall at the end of the trail was really nice. We spent some time there and had a little picnic. As we were packing up, we noticed a storm was starting to roll in. My wife and I started rushing and telling the kids we needed to go. About a quarter of the way back, it started to pour. We didn't mind the rain, but the scary part was the lightning and thunder. This had to be the loudest thunder we've heard. We tried our best to keep a quick pace, but at some point, I swear the storm was right on top of us. There was a tree a little ways away from us that we saw get struck with lightning. This was our cue to start booking it to the car. I picked up my son and started running as quick as I could. We thought about trying to find some shelter, but there wasn't anywhere that looked safe enough. After running for about 20 minutes, we made it back to the car. Everyone was safe, which was my main concern. We drove back to our campsite to find everything soaked and decided to spend the night in the car. I know this wasn't the scariest story, but being out in the open with a thunderstorm right above your wife and kids will get your heart beating for sure.